Chapter 1: The Architect of a Lie. I used to believe that betrayal was a sudden explosion, a single moment where everything you know turns to ash. But I was wrong. Betrayal is a slow rot. It's a cancer that grows in the dark corners of your home while you're busy building a future for the person who is currently killing you from the inside. My name is Daniel. I'm 38. For 9 years, I called Laura my North Star. She was the anchor that kept me grounded. And Mark? Mark was the brother I never had. We met in a cramped dorm room back in college, sharing cheap noodles and dreams of making it big. When I married Laura, Mark was my best man. I remember the speech he gave. He cried, telling everyone that I was the most loyal man he knew. The irony is a bitter pill to swallow now. For the first 8 years, our life was a masterpiece. Or so I thought. We had our rituals. Sunday morning blueberry pancakes, Friday night movies. I worked hard as a senior analyst, putting in long hours so Laura could pursue her passion for interior design. I wanted her to have the world. I wanted to be the man who provided everything. But about 14 months ago, the air in our house changed. It became heavy, cold. Laura started staying at the office until 9 p.m., sometimes 10 p.m. She'd come home smelling of a mixture of expensive gin and a cologne I didn't own. When I'd ask her about her day, she'd give me one-word answers while her thumb never stopped flickering across her phone screen. I remember one night, I reached out to touch her shoulder as she sat on the edge of the bed, and she flinched. She didn't just move away. She reacted as if my hand was a burning coal. That was the first time the seed of doubt was planted in my soul. But I buried it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that Mark, who was over at our house for every barbecue, was just being a supportive friend to both of us. How blind can a man be when he loves someone? Chapter 2: The Wednesday Mirage. The facade finally crumbled on a rainy Wednesday in November. The sky was the color of a bruised plum. My final meeting of the day was canceled at 3 p.m. Usually, I would have stayed at the office to get ahead of the next day's work. But something, a gut feeling, a whisper of intuition, told me to go home. I stopped at the grocery store. I bought steaks, a bottle of expensive red wine, and a bouquet of lilies. I wanted to surprise her. I wanted to fix whatever was breaking between us. As I turned onto our street, the rain was coming down in sheets. Through the rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers, I saw it. A black SUV parked crookedly in my driveway. Mark's car. My first thought wasn't suspicion. It was relief. I thought, good, Mark is here. We can all have dinner together. But as I pulled my car into the curb a few houses down, I don't even know why I didn't pull into the driveway. I noticed the house was dark. No lights in the kitchen. No lights in the living room. Only one window was glowing. Our bedroom. I walked to the front door, my heart starting to thud against my ribs, like a trapped bird. I didn't use the garage door opener. I used my key, turning it so slowly, the mechanism barely made a sound. The house smelled of her perfume and sweat. I didn't call out. I didn't drop my keys. I walked up those stairs, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Each step creaked under my weight, sounding like a death knell. Through the half-open door of our bedroom, I heard it. Laura's laugh. It wasn't the polite laugh she gave at dinner parties. It was intimate, deep. And then I heard Mark's voice. "I wish he stayed at the office forever," he whispered. "He's too boring for a woman like you anyway." I pushed the door open. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I watched them. I didn't blink. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 10 seconds. I watched the color drain from Mark's face until he looked like a ghost. I watched Laura scramble for the sheets, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and something else. Shame? No, it was the fear of getting caught. "Daniel, wait," Mark started, his voice cracking. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't break a mirror. If I had stayed, I might have lost my soul that night. I simply turned around and walked out. I drove into the storm, the rain blurring the world outside, just as the betrayal blurred my life inside. Chapter 3. The Cold Calculus. I spent that night in a motel by the highway. The neon sign outside flickered, casting a rhythmic red light over the room. I didn't sleep. I sat in a plastic chair and thought about every dollar I had earned, every sacrifice I had made, and every lie they had told me. Laura called me 32 times. Mark sent 18 texts. It was a mistake. We were drunk. "I love you, Daniel. Please come home." Liars always use the same script, but I was done being a character in their play. By 4 a.m., the shock had worn off, replaced by something much more dangerous. Logic. I realized that if I divorced her now, in the heat of passion, she would take half of everything. She would take the house I paid for. She would take the savings I built. And she would probably move Mark right into my bed the moment the papers were signed. I decided right then I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of my anger. I would give them the terror of my silence. I went home the next morning. Laura was waiting on the sofa, her face puffy from crying. She looked pathetic. When she saw me, she fell to her knees, sobbing about how she didn't know how it happened. I looked at her, and for the first time in 10 years, I felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, just a cold, clinical observation. "I'm not going to yell, Laura," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. "I'm tired. I want to try to move past this. But I need time. I need you to prove you want this marriage." She looked at me with a spark of hope that disgusted me. "Anything, Daniel. I'll do anything." "Good," I said. "Then don't mention his name again, and let me handle my grief in my own way." And so the game began. Chapter 4. The Slow Burn. For the next 6 months, I became the world's greatest actor. I played the grieving but trying husband. I let her cook for me. I let her buy me gifts. I even went to couples therapy with her. But I made sure to choose a therapist who specialized in trauma and infidelity, knowing exactly what kind of paper trail we were creating. Every day, I was a ghost in my own life. While she thought we were healing, I was meeting with a private investigator and a high-stakes divorce attorney. I found out the affair hadn't been a drunken mistake. It had been going on for 14 months. They had gone on weekend trips while I was on business travel. They had used our joint credit card for hotel rooms. Mark had even borrowed money from Laura, my money, to pay off his gambling debts. I didn't confront them, not yet. I watched as the passion between them began to rot under the pressure of reality. See, when you're sneaking around, it's an adventure. But when the husband knows, when the guilt is staring you in the face every morning at the breakfast table, the romance dies. I started noticing the cracks. Mark would call her, and she would reject the call with a look of annoyance. He was becoming a liability to her. He was broke. He was desperate. And he was losing his mind because I wouldn't fight him. He wanted me to hit him so he could feel like the hero. I gave him nothing but a polite nod when I saw him in public. It drove him insane. One evening, I sat in my car outside a bar and watched them meet in secret. They weren't kissing. They were screaming. Mark was pointing at her, and Laura was crying, shaking her head. They were trapped in a hell of their own making, and I was the one holding the keys. Chapter 5. The Legal Landmine. My lawyer was a shark named Elias. He told me, "Daniel, in this state, infidelity doesn't always guarantee a win, but a lifestyle of deceit and dissipation of marital assets, that's how we sink her." I spent months moving my personal inheritance into protected trusts. I documented every cent she spent on Mark. I recorded her confessions during our healing talks, where she admitted to the length and depth of the betrayal. I also made a move they never saw coming. I convinced Laura that we should reinvest our home equity into a new property venture, a company I had set up under a shell name. She signed the papers without looking, desperate to show me she trusted me. By the time I was done, Laura owned a tiny fraction of the house, and most of our liquid cash was tied up in accounts she couldn't touch without a court order that would take years to obtain. Meanwhile, Mark's life was in free fall. I had quietly shared a few tips with his employer about his erratic behavior and his side hustle that violated his non-compete clause. He was fired in early March. The two people who had tried to destroy me were now drowning, and they were grabbing onto each other only to pull the other one down faster. Chapter 6. The Final Reckoning. The end didn't come with a bang. It came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after I first saw them together. I woke up early. I made Laura a cup of coffee, just the way she liked it. I kissed her on the forehead. "I have a surprise for you on the kitchen table," I whispered. "I'm going for a long drive. I think it's time for our next chapter." She smiled. She actually smiled, thinking I was taking her on a vacation. I walked out the door, got into my car, which was already packed with my essentials, and drove to the airport. I had a one-way ticket to a city 2,000 miles away, where a new job and a new life were waiting. On the kitchen table sat a thick blue folder. Inside was the 14-month history of her affair, the photos of her and Mark at the hotel, the bank statements showing the money she stole from our future to fund his gambling, and of course the divorce summons. But the real kicker, the property venture she signed. It was a legal transfer of her remaining equity to cover the debts she had incurred against the marriage. I turned my phone off before the plane took off. Chapter 7. Karma Never Sleeps. I heard about the aftermath through the grapevine months later. Laura tried to sue, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge looked at the records of her spending marital funds on her lover and the recorded confessions of her year-long deception, she walked away with almost nothing. The house was sold, and the proceeds went almost entirely to me. She turned to Mark, expecting him to be her savior. But Mark was a broken man. Without a job and with the thrill of the affair gone, he blamed her for everything. They had a massive, violent argument in a parking lot that ended with a restraining order. Last I heard, Mark is working a dead-end job in another state, living in a studio apartment. Laura moved back in with her parents, the shining star of the town, now a cautionary tale whispered about at grocery stores. People ask me if I feel guilty, if I think I went too far. I tell them this: I didn't destroy their lives. I simply stepped back and stopped holding the umbrella while their own actions rained down on them. The best revenge isn't a punch in the face. It isn't a screaming match. It's the quiet, systematic removal of yourself from a toxic situation, while ensuring that the people who hurt you have to live with the consequences of who they truly are. I have a new home now. The air is light, the windows are open, and for the first time in a decade, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a fool. I see a man who knew his worth, waited for his moment, and let karma finish the job. If you are going through this right now, remember, anger is a fire that burns you. Patience is the water that drowns your enemies. Stay calm, stay silent, and wait for the perfect moment to walk away.